Hi, this is Kayla, and I am the moderator this week for week 7 for group 4. We are going to talk about a couple of the questions for week 7's readings. The first question was, what can you tell about the quality and utility of the Shim et al. Article from the first page? So unfortunately I only have 2 videos to work with from our group this week. That would be Martha and I's videos, so I'm going to do my best to kind of combine our thoughts here. Martha talked about how, just in the title itself, the predictors of homelessness, that you kind of get an idea of what this is going to be about. And on the first page we get kind of an overview. We can kind of see what the article, what the research paper is going to kind of tell us. It's got the abstract in there, kind of a brief synopsis of what the paper's about, the objectives, so it's kind of telling you what we're trying to achieve, how we're going to achieve it, the methods that are used, and then the results, what they find in their study. So it kind of shows you that this was a intensive research project, that it was a process, that they started with an idea, they formulated how they wanted to kind of test this idea, the methods that they were going to use, the population they were going to work with, and then the results. What did they find? And by demonstrating in the results, Martha was talking about the demographic characteristics, and that they talked about the different factors that can lead towards homelessness. So it's kind of very extensive research. It's not just a simple kind of graze the surface question, that they dug deep into that and wanted to find out what was really going on. So just from the first page you can really get a good idea of what's the issue, how are we going to look at it, what are we trying to achieve here, and then obviously in the results, what is it that they found, and then obviously it goes into that deeper, further into the reading, but you can get a really good picture of the whole idea just from that first page there. So then moving into the second part of the question for group 4, and that was, according to the video lecture, how does ecological measurement help us to do better research and action, and how would you apply this to your own interest using examples? So for this question, Martha was talking about some examples from the article, how they looked at these different factors that were leading towards homelessness, kind of looking at the bigger issue. They didn't just, like I said, graze the surface there. They talked about factors like poverty, being single parents, a lack of education, welfare dependence, substance abuse, mental health problems, and how all of these things kind of contribute to the greater problem of the homelessness. So there's not necessarily one issue, it's a factor of issues, and if you didn't do ecological measurement here, you wouldn't necessarily understand these things. You have to look at everything kind of as a whole. You have to see the bigger picture, and you have to understand that when you look at one part of the problem, you're looking at it from a smaller perspective, and then you can start to look at it bigger and bigger and kind of start to see patterns. When they were doing this research in the paper, they were seeing the patterns of how things turned out with homelessness, different patterns of contributing factors towards homelessness, different patterns of things that were helping to overcome homelessness, so you can kind of start to see a pattern. And then going into applying it to our own interests, I talked about in my individual posts how I would like to work with the refugee and immigrant populations. And in working with the population like that, you kind of have to apply that ecological measurement. You have to start small and look at, okay, what is the issue that we want to overcome, kind of trying to pinpoint what you're going to study, what is it that you want to find out, and then growing from there. Okay, we've learned this, so now let's look at this. And it's kind of a domino effect in terms of you find out something that's going to lead you to something else. You might find out, for instance, with the the reading that that you think that the problem is homelessness, but then you find out that the homelessness is on behalf of poverty or lack of education, so that there are other problems leading into this problem, and that you have to look at kind of everything. You can't just look at one of those issues. You have to sort of expand on that, as well as when you start to expand, looking for patterns, looking for, okay, what have we seen consistently? What can we conclude from this? What's working, what's not working, what ideas do we have, and then kind of formulating, all right, what's our conclusion here? What do we think needs to happen? And if we don't use ecological measurement in our research, then it's kind of it's failing to contribute to making greater change. And we've learned from past weeks that part of our job as researchers is to contribute towards greater change, to be change agents, and so ecological measurement will really help us to do that. So that is what our group 4, has concluded for this week. So I look forward to watching your responses.